Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the American Chamber of Commerce in Moldova and FinTech Hub, it is my great pleasure to welcome you here this morning at Green Finance and Investment Forum. This event brings together policy makers, financial partners, development partners, investors, private sector, to participate in discussions about investment, green investment, and sustainable finance, of course. Transformation that is very, very important nowadays, and as Moldova advances on its EU integration path. The strategic partners of this event today are Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Moldova, delegation of the European Union to the Republic of Moldova, EU for Green Recovery, Innovate Moldova, funded by the governments of Sweden and the United Kingdom of IFC Moldova, IBRD Moldova, and TechWell. And of course, the special occasion for today's event is the visit in Moldova of a distinguished guest, Her Excellency Jessica Roswell, European Commissioner for Environment, Water, and Competitive Circular Economy. And just in a while, Commissioner will come onto the stage to deliver her keynote speech. But before it, I would like to warmly invite onto the stage His Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, Alexandru Munteanu. Dear Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, Commissioner Jessica Roswell, dear colleague, Minister Hajdar, distinguished partners, ladies and gentlemen, well, first of all, good morning and welcome to Chisinau. Madam Commissioner, your visit to Chisinau comes at a very important moment. We have entered a new stage of our European journey, where success is measured not by promises, but by implementation. Today's forum is exactly about that. If we look back just a few decades, and I'm looking more than just a few decades back, we notice something remarkable. For much of the 20th century, countries measured their wealth, but how much they could extract from nature. I remember those pictures and photos from 30s last century, from all across the world, certainly from the Soviet Union, those pictures of smoke going into the air. It's almost like the level of industrialization should be measured by how much pollution that industrialization creates. Today, it's a completely different picture, because the economy of the future will either be green or will not be competitive. This is no longer simply an environmental debate. It's about investment and economics. Only a few weeks ago at the EU-Moldova Investment Conference, we demonstrated that Moldova is becoming a country that inspires confidence and attracts investment. And actually, one single biggest investment coming from the private sector in the renewables was from a Swedish-Danish company, over 200 million euros, which is quite important, because if the private sector sees a value in that, that means that it builds some self-sustainability. Today's forum is the next step, not whether we invest, but how we do it. Before entering, actually, the public service, I had the privilege to travel all across Europe, to almost every member state of the European Union. Ambassador knows that I visited all the countries with one exception, Iceland. I was in the Reykjavik airport, but doesn't count. I don't call it traveling. As an economist, entrepreneur, investor, and rather as a scholar of the European modern history and development, I watch countries with different backgrounds and different economies arrive at a very important conclusion. Protecting the environment is not a cost. It's an investment in competitiveness and in the future. Over the years, I also had the privilege of working closely with many Swedish colleagues. Sweden has shown Europe that economic growth and environmental responsibility do not compete with each other. They strengthen each other. That experience has stayed with me over the years. Early this year, actually in February, I had the privilege to be in Davos, and I spent an hour talking to former Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, about the environmental issues. As you remember, Al Gore was a Nobel Peace Prize laureate whose work has shaped the global debate on climate change. One idea from that discussion has remained with me. Today, climate, economy, energy security, and investment are no longer separate issues. They actually come all together. It's the same conversation. There is another experience I often think about. Years ago, I was chairman of the board of the company called Chumak in Dnipro Delta. It's Novaya Kakhovka, Kherson region. Chumak is one of the top 10 brand names in Ukraine. Chumak is actually the sellers of salt in the ancient times. And at the ancient times, it was measured often not in gold, but in salt, because salt was a very precious ingredient. And for instance, in English, we say Milky Way. In Romanian, we say Caia Lactee, La Voie Lactée in French. In Ukrainian, they say Chumatsky Shliach, which means the road of the sellers of salt. Well, it was one of the most beautiful places I've seen in my life, very similar to Delta of Danube, here very close to us. But today it bears scars of this Russian invasion. The company we built, and actually was a joint venture with Hans Rausing, the founder of Tetra Pak, and the King of Sweden actually visited us, but that's a different story. I will share the experience privately. This company was destroyed, but most importantly, the whole delta was destroyed when the dig on the Dnipro River was destroyed when the Russians blew it off. So I think it reminds us that protecting nature means also protecting peace. And the Republic of Moldova has been blessed with fertile land, magnificent forests, rivers, and lakes. Protecting them, it's not only good for environmental policy, it's also good for economics, and that's our responsibility for the next generations. And it's part of our European future. The opening of EU accession negotiations marks a new stage for Moldova, a stage focused on implementation, investment, and on results. Together with the European Union, we are building a stronger economy, a greener country, and a better future. Ladies and gentlemen, we inherited this country from our ancestors, and this planet, by the way, we also inherited, for that matter. So like the Little Prince, and some of the people present here knows that I still believe that Little Prince is one of the most beautiful, most philosophical pieces of art. He was saying, before you start doing big things, just take care of this planet. So let's take care of this planet. We will do our part of work here in Moldova, making it greener, stronger, and more prosperous than we received. Not because Europe expects it from us, because this is what we as Moldovans want, and for the next generation, for our children, for our grandchildren. Thank you so much.
Prime Minister, I was not as brave to jump up like you did here. Very impressive. Prime Minister, Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really delighted to join you on this event today. I am also very delighted that you have chosen green finance and investments as your theme for this conference. How to finance our transition to a greener, cleaner, and more resilient economy is a fundamental question. It matters not only for our industry, financial institutions, rural communities, and local authorities, but for the whole society and all of us. So the question is, how do we get there, and how do we mobilize the funding that we need? I can think of no better setting to discuss than this, because we need to remember that there is no such thing as a transition without collaboration across sectors, over borders, and between regions. And that is why today's forum, with public authorities, financial institutions, investors, development partners, and the business community, is so important. And at its core, the green transition is about resilience. It's about building a society, an economy, and that can thrive and prosper from generations to come, that can weather global and economic shocks, whether they are caused by climate change, real wars and trade wars, biodiversity loss, pandemics, or something else entirely. Environmental policy is one of the central pillars in this transition. But today, policy is so much more than simply protecting nature, exactly as the Prime Minister said. Environmental policy has become economic policy, and you can wonder why. Well, you cannot, because healthy ecosystems and nature are the foundation of a healthy economy. They clean our air, stabilize our soils, pollinate our crops, and define our climate. Take water, for example. It grows our foods, powers our business, provides electricity, delivers our trade, and nourishes our societies. Imagine a society without clean, abundant water. Factories shut up, businesses that close down, our homes are dark, and our fields are dry. So it is to me no surprise that when I see studies showing that more than half of our global GDP is moderate or highly dependent on nature, that figure is actually from the World Bank I met this morning, or another study when I read that more than 7 out of 10 companies in the euro area are critically dependent on nature. In fact, I would argue that all of GDP and all companies rely on nature in one way or another. This means that we need to invest in ecosystems or in sustainability. We are not only being generous to nature, we are investing in our future, again, exactly as the Prime Minister said. And we also have the evidence that proves that. We have seen how restoring wetlands means less flooding. We know how circular economy creates new business opportunities while reducing pressure on our ecosystems, and how protecting grassland benefits farmlands. And that's why environmental policy is the cornerstone of our plans to build a competitive economy and sustainable, resilient future. For example, in the EU, our nature restoration regulation is the first comprehensive law of its kind and supports the restoration of ecosystems. And last summer, the European Commission adopted Nature Credits Roadmap to boost private investment in nature-positive actions. We have also scaled up biodiversity funding and aim to contribute up to 10% of our budget 2026 and 2027. And I'm very pleased that Moldova is so interested in these topics. You have made impressive progress in the recent years. The opening of the first negotiation cluster is a milestone in accession talks, and it should be celebrated. Congratulations to all of us. It demonstrates Moldova's commitment, and it shows what is possible. Now Moldova needs to focus on dedication, on decarbonization, on ecosystem protection, and on circular economy. And I believe that the green transition and the environmental action underpins it, is the compass that can guide Moldova's path to the EU. A lot of work has already been done to align your legislative framework with that's in the EU. But as you know, this is an ongoing journey. Let me share some of the thoughts on how to get to our shared destination. First of all, we need visionary decision makers to look beyond next election. They need to make the green transition a priority. Deciding how to spend limited resources is never easy, I know that, especially when the results of these decisions may not be visible in the short term. But in the medium to long term, environmental policy, the circular economy, and restoring and protecting our ecosystem mean better economic performance, greater quality of life, and bigger opportunities for our businesses. However, decisions alone are not enough. You also need to ensure that you have an efficient administration to turn this decision into concrete actions. To design environmental rules and then to implement and enforce them. It is good to have laws on paper, but they also need to work on the ground. This is challenging everywhere, not just here. However, in Moldova, only a fraction of the budget is being directed to environmental policy, so there is an enormous potential here. The EU is determined to support Moldova's efforts. Take EU-Moldova growth plan, for example. This 1.9 billion euro package ties financial disbursement directly to green, structural and administrative reforms. They are another important project underway across Moldova. Millions of euros in the EU funding are improving water resilience, energy security, air quality and much more. A 200 million euro loan from European Investment Bank is backing a reforestation program that will fight climate change and strengthen rural economies. And the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development is financing efforts to modernize solid waste infrastructure in Moldova. And as we speak, we are also looking into exactly how much funding Moldova needs to be compliant with EU environmental legislations. By the end of this year, we will have a much clearer idea on these financing needs, and then the hard work really begins. Ladies and gentlemen, I like to think of enlargement as a stool that rests on 3 legs. Aligning with EU legislation is one leg, and I commend the efforts that is ongoing. Having the administrative capacity to implement the new legislation is another leg. And here more needs to be done, as you know. And crucially, the investments needed to bring Moldova's environmental standards up to EU standards. This is the final leg of the accession stool. Moldova needs serious financing plans backed by serious political commitments to address serious investment gaps. This will be essential as we advance on the environmental chapter. Now let me finish with one important point. Nature is the backbone of our infrastructure. So when we invest in it, we are not choosing nature over growth. We are choosing the kind of growth that lasts. The EU is committed in its process and to Moldova, and I'm here to lend a hand, not to point a finger. So I really look forward to hearing your thoughts also on the green transition. I'm looking forward to join you on the Moldova's path on the EU accession. And I look forward to working with you to build a healthy ecosystem, a resilient, competitive economy, and a prosperous future for people across Moldova and around Europe. Thank you very much.
Dear Commissioner, dear Prime Minister, thank you for these very inspirational remarks, conveying a lot of ambition into all the stakeholders that have to be part of this green transformation. As I mentioned earlier, one of the strategic partners of this event is, of course, the Minister of Environment. And I would like to kindly invite into the stage Minister Gheorghe Hașder, the Minister of Environment. Thank you.
Your Excellency Prime Minister, Madam Commissioner, Your Excellency Ambassadors, colleagues from the government, dear international partners and representatives of the business community. Moldova is a green country. The full room today at the Finance and Investment Forum is the best proof that the commitment to the green transition is growing stronger in our country. And most importantly, it's supported by the European Union. Dear Rosa, I know this is not first time in Moldova, but I would like to welcome you as Commissioner. Your presence here, it's a strong message of support of our European path and Moldova's effort to become a part of European family. The environmental has no border, and Moldova is ready to join you and work together on this. I have no doubt that we will enjoy our country and that you will have many reasons to return, and not only for work, but to discover its beautiful places. Moldova may be a small country, but it has much to offer. Doamnelor și domnilor, pentru mult timp, domeniul mediului a fost privit cu reținere, iar Ministerul Mediului era asociat mai mult cu restricții, amenzi sau cu un simplu paznic al apelor și pădurilor. Desigur, protejarea resurselor naturale rămâne o responsabilitate esențială. În ultima perioadă am demonstrat o voință fermă. Am accelerat ritmul de aliniere a standardelor la Uniunea Europeană. Și nu facem acest efort doar pentru a bifa niște cerințe. O facem pentru că standardele oferă, în primul rând, respect pentru cetățeni, oferă un aer mai curat, apă mai sigură și o economie mai durabilă și mai competitivă. În ultimii ani am reușit să trecem de la strategii la fapte care schimbă realitatea. Am lansat Programul Național de Împădurire, prin care ne propunem să facem o țară mai verde și mai împădurită. Am pus bazele unui sistem de management al deșeurilor, care ne va aduce o soluție ecologică și sigură pentru gestionarea deșeurilor. Vom implementa sistemul de depozit, o soluție care ne va scăpa de milioane de ambalaje de plastic, metal sau sticlă. Investim tot mai mult în lacuri, râuri și diguri împotriva inundațiilor. Am inclus criterii obligatorii de mediu în toate programele, strategiile și proiectele capitale din Republica Moldova. Și în ultimul rând, suntem determinați să identificăm mai multe resurse financiare, astfel încât să putem sprijini proiecte verzi cu impact real pentru oameni, comunități și mediu. Astăzi, vedem cum sistemul bancar în Republica Moldova, antreprenorii noștri și mari investitori nu mai privesc criteriile de mediu ca pe o povară birocratică. Le privesc ca o oportunitate uriașă de dezvoltare și o garanție a sustenabilității afacerilor pe termen lung. Și încă mai avem mult de muncă. Tranziția către o economie verde necesită multă determinare, viziune și mai ales investiții și suport. Din acest motiv, angajamentul nostru este mai multă finanțare verde în afacerile noastre, în fermele noastre, în afacerile tinerilor antreprenori. Vrem ca modernizarea ecologică să fie accesibilă, să genereze profit și să creeze locuri verzi, bine plătite acasă în Moldova. Doamnelor și domnilor, viitorul economiei Republicii Moldova va fi verde. Doar așa putem fi eficienți și competitivi în viitor. Vă invit să fim parteneri în această transformare istorică. Vă mulțumesc!
Thank you. I now would like to invite the strategic partners, of course, Madam Commissioner, Mr. Prime Minister, into the stage for a family photo.